One team that is going to be absolutely fascinating to watch in 2024. The Missouri Tigers, their head football coach, Eliah Drinkwitz, joining us right now on the show. Eli, thanks a lot for being here. Summer's winding down, 43 days out from you guys kicking off against Murray State. How are we feeling?
Yeah, feel pretty good. Yeah, summer's over. I kind of feel like that moment before you're going to ride a roller coaster, that little nervous feeling in your stomach as you're getting ready to go up. The difference is a roller coaster's over in about 70 seconds. This is going to go on for the next 6 months. So, but other than that, we're ready to go.
In the current college football environment where you've got NIL and you got multiple transfer windows and you got traditional recruiting, do you go to an island and like fish for a week? What does an off season look like for you?
Man, I'm glad you asked. I spent 2 days in Disney, spent a week in Anna Marie Island, and then I spent 5 days in Montana. So I kind of hit all the senses there and did everything. I rode a horse, fly fished, hiked 8 miles around Lake Como to see some waterfalls, rode Guardians of the Galaxy in Tron, and saw the wildlife in the ocean, saw a manatee and stingrays. So I've had enough vacation. I'm ready to get back to work.
I'm just glad you did some other things after the 2 days at Disney, because I would think just the stress level, at least for me, taking 2 kids there, you need at least another week of vacation just to wind down from that experience.
Yeah, I would say that was the best decision that we made on the trip. Was we went to Disney first. And so everything after that was a lot simpler than having to worry about what ride we were going to ride next. How do we get fast passes? How much money is it going to cost to go have a snack, to get the ice cream Disney and figure out our next step there. So that was a good planning.
So it's been a long time, I think, since Missouri football was the sexy team going into the season, one that every top 10 rankings has you guys somewhere in there, especially going into a season with an expanded college football playoff. It's the first time I've heard at an SEC Media Day a Missouri coach have to kind of temper some expectations. But if you're being real about how you feel about this team, what do you think you have in 2024?
Well, it depends. It depends if you ask the sports writers or you ask the creators of College Football 25. They don't think we're very good, so maybe they know more than we do. But I think we have a talented, competitive football team. But the reality of it is that doesn't make anything. You're going to have to go out there and prove it on the football field. And that's kind of the same thing I told our players about that whole college football game. Like, who cares, man? Like, what really matters is how much we develop during the month of August, and then what do we prove each Saturday. And I think the unique and exciting thing about college football now is without divisions, it's clearly going to be after 12 games, you put your record up, and this body of whoever it is going to decide who are the 12 best teams that we think deserve a shot to compete in the playoffs. And if we know anything from the NFL is that if you make the playoffs, anything can happen. And if you can get hot, it's the right matchups, anybody can win. And so for us, it's clearly about being competitive, having the competitive depth that we need, and then focus on being 1-0 each week.
Have you played the college football game, or are you just dealing with the fact that every player around the country got the game instantaneously and are all like, what is this? What are we doing here? This is what they think of us?
No, I don't have time to play that game, and if I did, I'd get my butt whipped. But I can coach, so it would probably be better for me if I had somebody else play the game, and I just coach them on what I want them to do. It's kind of like me as a player. I'm a terrible player, but coaching is something that I like.
So tell me about your offense. You got a lot of starters back on that side of the football. Yeah. You got a guy like Luther Burden, who's a really, really good player. What's kind of the upside, and what's your biggest challenge on that side of the ball here in 2024?
Yeah, I think the biggest upside is the amount of starting experience we have coming back. I've got a 3-year starter at quarterback returning, Brady Cook, who is very efficient, takes care of the football, very athletic, runs the ball very well, can beat you in multiple ways. I've got the deepest wide receiver room that I've ever had, and one of the most talented wide receiver rooms in the country. It starts obviously with Luther Burden. Everybody knows returning 1,000-yard receiver, potential NFL prospect. But right next to him is Theo Weiss, who I credit with really the maturation of that room. Theo Weiss is very good, faster than you think football player, an excellent deep ball wide receiver, can single up and run routes on anybody. You got Mookie Cooper on the outside. You got Marquise Johnson, who's one of the fastest players in college football. Josh Manning, Mekhi Miller. You got Courtney Crutchfield, who is the number one wide receiver number one wide player in the state of Arkansas. So James Madison, coming from St. Thomas Aquinas. That room is really deep. Combined with an experienced quarterback, you have to have the ability to be explosive on offense. And then we have a tight end who is a freshman All-American, Brett Norfleet, who I think is a complete tight end, NFL prospect if there's ever been one. Blocks is as physical in the run game as any tight end I've ever been around, but he's got incredible hands. With all that being said, I know this is an NFL-driven show. We all know that in order to win football games at a high level, the biggest challenge is the O-line and running backs. We're replacing a left tackle who was drafted in the 4th round by the Jacksonville Jaguars, a left guard who signed a free agent deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and obviously the SEC's leading rusher, Cody Schrader. So that's really where we have to develop a set of chemistry and understanding, because we all know there's going to be times when the pass game's not working. You're going to have to be able to run the ball. And we talk about in the 4th quarter, you got to run to win. And so that's where we've got to really decide and figure out how we can be at the best. Now, I still think we're very capable at those positions. Our center started 22 games last year. Our right guard has 29 career starts. Our right tackle's got 18 career starts. I think he's the best right tackle in the SEC, which would make him the best right tackle in the country, Armand Membu. I think the left tackle, Marcus Bryant, started 29 games, 2-time all-conference player at an AAC institution, so transferring up to the SEC. What's the adjustment there? Caden Green, left guard, started 6 games as a true freshman. So the ability's there. It's just the cohesiveness, the togetherness, who's going to emerge as the leader. Are we going to be able to sustain competitive excellence if there's an injury? That's probably the biggest challenge at the offensive side of the ball.
I don't want to give away, your approach 43 days out from Murray State, but it sure seems like the way you're describing this roster, you've got a team that people are going to fear the pass, and you guys have kind of created running backs and created a running game with regardless who's in the backfield. Am I fair? Is it fair to say that?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. And we've got some elite players at the running back position. I mean, we got 2 transfers, Marcus Carroll and Nate Noel, who both were their leading rushers at their respective teams last year. We've got Kejuan Lacey, who was one of the elite running backs in this class, who is coming in as a true freshman, and Tavares Jones and Jamal Roberts consistently do the things that they're asked to do. So there's plenty of talent in that room, but I do think you're going to have the ability to be feared because of the threats you have at wide receiver and a quarterback. But if you can effectively run the ball, man, you really have an offense that is dynamic, and that changes the game.
So the landscape of the SEC has changed a lot for a variety of reasons. Nick's not at Alabama anymore. You got teams like Oklahoma and Texas coming in. Just give me the state of what's long been the toughest conference in college football and kind of how you see this thing moving forward in coming years.
Well, I think it's interesting because you just added 2 blue bloods of college football in Oklahoma and Texas. And, Oklahoma is used to competing for the conference championship every year. And I thought Coach Venables answered that question excellent yesterday. Like, they're not running from the SEC, they're running to it, and their expectations of their program's not changing. So they're expecting to be a contender every year. I know the state of Texas expects to contend every year. So you're adding 2 teams that have championship aspirations each and every year. Combine that with other schools in our SEC rabid fan bases that fire coaches if they're not competing for the championship every year. So I don't think the competition's going anywhere. I think it's just going to elevate it. Now, I think the dynamic that has changed is that without divisions, everybody is uniquely running their own race. Like, we don't play Texas this year. We don't play Georgia. We don't play Tennessee. We don't play Florida. We don't play Kentucky. We don't play LSU. And so, we're not having the same crossover games as everybody else. We have a unique schedule that's uniquely ours, and we have to play that schedule. And then at the end, we'll see if that gets us in an opportunity to compete for the conference championship or not. I think one of the unique things that's not really been discussed right now is what is the SEC tiebreaker? Because
Mhm.
in theory, there's 3 teams that could go undefeated in the SEC, and how are you going to break that tiebreaker? And there's multiple teams that could have multiple losses, and so I think that's something that is yet to be finalized that we got to figure out.
That sounds a lot like some of the debates that happened pre-playoff when you had split national championships. You had everybody, hanging a banner and deciding they're the ones. Your schedule, it is interesting going through it because I'm looking for the same things you just mentioned, which is you don't play Texas this year. You got a stretch of at Alabama on October 26th, a bye, and then home against Oklahoma, which I know you're going one game at a time, but that seems like kind of where some of the separation might take place. And your fans had to be through the roof of something like a conference game against Oklahoma at home in November. Like, that's just, as storylines go, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think with X and social media, I mean, there's everybody's looking forward to the November 9th game. In fact, I was getting drilled about it yesterday at SEC Media Days. But as a head coach and as a team, you realize that the only way that November 9th game is really significant is if you take care of the games prior to that. And there's no chance that this football team's going to overlook a Boston College who beat us in overtime 3 years ago. There's no chance that we don't have a tremendous amount of respect for going to College Station and trying to win in front of 105,000 screaming fans with the Yellville and all that different stuff. And Auburn at home, I mean, that's a really good. I know firsthand how good an Auburn football team is from coaching there. So there's a tremendous amount of respect for what our schedule presents, and people look at it off the cuff and are like, "Oh man, you got an easy schedule." I promise you, if you put our schedule up against a lot of schools and other conferences, ain't none of them trading for it. We have the 29th hardest schedule in the country, and there's a lot of schools at other P4 conferences that wouldn't hold; they would wilt if they put up our schedule. So, it is what it is as far as looking at it, but I have a lot of respect for what we have to do in order to have the success that we want.
As a Boston College graduate, I appreciate. I haven't heard many positive things said about the program in like 15 years here. But Bill O'Brien coming in, it'll be interesting to see exactly how that entire thing plays out.
Jeff Hafley whipped my butt 3 years ago up there, overtime field goal, beat us. They rushed the field. I'll never forget that. It's one of the lowest points in my career. So if they don't think they've got my full attention, they're absolutely crazy.
Well, you talked about the pressure cooker that every SEC coach is in. When you suffer a loss like that, like personally, how do you deal with any loss, any big game, small game, whatever it is? Like, how do you personally deal with losing?
I think the realization for me in the SEC is it doesn't matter if you lose an SEC game or a non-conference game. Everybody expects you to win, and that's what they pay us to do. And so if you think that there's any type of saving grace about losing football games, there's not. There's no excuses for it. So I don't know how you deal with it. I usually look like that, screaming and yelling and try to hide.
I didn't pick the photo, Eli. This is no, you take it up with the control room on that one.
No, that's a great photo. It's a great segue right there. I think the reality of it is, for us as college football coaches, you got to find a way to move on to the next play or the next game. And you have to go back and figure out what caused us to lose, take the emotion out of it. What were the tactical errors that we made mistakes in that prevented us from winning the game? And whether that's we weren't talented enough, okay, we got to go back and revamp how we recruit so we can become talented enough, or did we make mistakes in an X's and O standpoint? Did I make mistakes as the head coach? 2 years ago, I went back and said, hey, I'm making a mistake by calling plays. I can't call plays anymore. I got to go hire somebody who's better than me at calling plays. And that was a way that we changed in order to be successful.
Last thing for you, real quick, Eli. I really appreciate your time here. Excited to see you guys out on the field this fall. You made a point yesterday in your preamble at SEC Media Day to talk about Mike Leach and say he deserves to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. I think that we all, people who cover the game or in the game, we all know the impact he's had schematically and otherwise. He was a great character. What's your favorite Mike Leach story? Whatever it might be, what's your best Mike Leach story?
I've got two of them. The first one is when me and him joined the SEC at the same time. Now, when I say joined at the same time, that's the same year. But when we go to meetings, he was never on time. He would always walk in late, but he would sit right next to me. And so then it was like that student in class who would want me to catch him up while Commissioner Sankey is talking. He's like leaning over like, hey, you got a pen? Hey, what's he talking about? I'm looking over like, dude, shut up. I'm going to get in trouble from the principal here. If you would just show up on time, we wouldn't have had this issue. But that was uniquely Mike. But the second thing is, and this is the one I appreciate the most, I actually still have the screenshot saved, is me, Coach Leach, and Lane Kiffin were in a group text. And when they played each other, I sent those two a text message of them being at Washington State and USC talking pregame, and then I sent a text message of them pregame at Mississippi State and Ole Miss. And just the commentary from those two is priceless to me, because of how big of personalities both of them have. And I think fondly of Coach Leach. He absolutely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Simple, easy way to do it would say, hey, delete the COVID year. Okay. COVID year, none of that year should count towards anybody's records, because now it doesn't affect the Howard Schnellenberger camp. It doesn't affect anybody else's camp. It just, hey, that year didn't happen. His winning percentage is clearly above the 60% threshold. If you take that out, his primary games that he coached in were at Texas Tech and Washington State, and he's clearly above the 60% threshold and is clearly a Hall of Famer with those games on the record book. And so I think that's the easiest way to do it. And so I think if the CEO of the College Football Hall of Fame would take that, it's an easy way to put him on there and have the discretion to do that.
Well, and if it's the logic, because if the COVID year never happened in terms of eligibility for players, everybody got an additional year for that, then why would this count against coaches? It makes sense. That just was kind of its own animal. Eli,
and we played an all SEC schedule. It was 10 SEC games.
Right.
Never been done in the history before. I think their record, they ended up beating us that year. I think they were 4-6, but they didn't have the ability to play in non-conference games. So again, you take that season out from his record, and clearly a Hall of Famer, and this is a non-starter conversation. But somebody has to bring this attention onto it, because in my opinion, that Hall of Fame is incomplete without Mike Leach.
Best of luck this season, Eli. Thanks for coming on. Don't play any PlayStation 5 or anything before the season. You don't need to see it. You can call the EA folks after the first couple of games, and maybe we'll see how some of those rankings change.
Hey, MIZ and the picture of Luther Burden is atrocious. I have no idea who that is, but that is not Luther Burden.
Eli, thanks a lot, man. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
That's Eliah Drinkwitz, Missouri head coach, one of the greats in the game. You can 100% see Mike Leach coming into the meeting late and then just kind of mumbling under his breath the entire time.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.